बस 1 मिनट है ना मैं स्टार्ट कर देना 1 मिनट का यस मैम स्टार्ट कर
PhD is not just about finding answers. It's about crafting the right questions, structuring the journey, and contributing a meaningful chapter to the book of human knowledge. Good evening, esteemed speaker, distinguished faculty members, and our warm attendees. On behalf of the organizing committee, it is my privilege to welcome you to the fifth day of International Faculty Development Program on PhD crafting, proposal, and thesis structuring. As we move forward in this transformative journey, today marks another milestone in our pursuit of academic excellence and scholarly refinement. Let us embrace today with curiosity, determination, and the spirit of discovery as we delve deeper into the art of crafting and impactful research. Wishing you all an insightful and productive session ahead. Great minds ignite curiosity, and true educators turn it into knowledge. It is an honor to introduce Dr. Vatsala Pawar, a distinguished academic and researcher in chemistry, currently an associate professor at Jaipur National University. She brings nearly 18 years of teaching experience at both graduate and postgraduate levels. Dr. Pawar earned her PhD from MDS University, Ajmer, specializing in macrocyclic, shift basic, and metal complexes. Her prolific research includes highly cited papers, multiple patents, and the prestigious Dynamic Researcher Award. She has also authored a book on environmental science and serves as an examiner for doctoral thesis. Beyond academia, Dr. Power is an active peer reviewer, seminar participant, and organizing committee member at national and international conferences. Her dedication to research and education continues to inspire the scientific community. Let us deeply warm welcome Dr. Vatsala Power. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to have with you today as a part of this FDP, which aimed to enhance the skills related to the PhD proposals and research writings, etc. And today we will focus on thesis structuring and introduction to the thesis writing also. It will be a guide to structuring and writing your thesis. So today's objective will be, after completion of the session, the participant will be able to describe what are the purpose of writing an academic thesis, how to write a thesis, what are the component of the thesis, and what are the steps of thesis work. So let's begin. First of all, what's the thesis is? According to the dictionary meaning, a long piece of writing completed by a student as a part of university degree based on their own research. A thesis is a comprehensive research paper or a project required for the completion of a degree. Its purpose is to contribute original research or insights to a field of study and to demonstrate the student's understanding and expertise. Now let's go through the evaluation of the thesis, how it was originated. Let's have the journey of the thesis. You know, the origin and the history of the thesis as an academic concept date back to the ancient times, evolving significantly over the centuries. Here's a look at its historical development. Now let's start with the ancient Greece and Rome time period. The concept of thesis, it was originated from the Greek word, which was symbolized like this, as you can see here, which means thesis. And thesis means something put forth or proposition. Philosophers like Aristotle and Socrates would use a thesis as a foundation statement or hypothesis to be argued. In medieval universities, that is between the 12th and 15th century, the students studying the liberal arts, law, theological, or medicine would engage in the public debates or disputations, where they presented a thesis statement that they would defend against arguments from faculty or peers, and writing and defending a thesis had become a requirement for attaining advanced degrees. Now, in the 16th to 18th century, during the Renaissance, education and scholarship became more widely available and universities developed a broader curriculum. The thesis became an essential component of degree completion with a strong emphasis on original thinking and argumentation. The Enlightenment and the development of the modern research, which took place in between the 18th and 19th century. The Enlightenment placed emphasis on the rationality, empirical evidences, and scientific method, profoundly influencing academic scholarships. Post World War II, research universities expanded, and the thesis became requirement not only for the PhD programs but also for many master's degree programs. This expansion made the thesis global academic standard. Now, digital age and contemporary thesis writing. 20th, 21st century, it became more research focused, emphasizing scientific methodology, literature review, and original contribution to the knowledge. The digital era has transformed thesis writing and access to digital libraries, online journals, and data analytical tools. These are now often published online, increasing their accessibility. Today, it remains cornerstone of higher education, symbolizing expertise, critical thinking, and original research in various fields. Once again, please. Sorry. Now, let's start with the academic write up. First, understand what the academic write up is. It is a structural piece of the writing focused on the specific topic within a scholarly or educational context. Its main goals is to inform, analyze, or argue based on research, evidence, and critical thinking. Academic write ups can take many forms, including essays, research papers, theses, reports, literature reviews, and general articles. So, a thesis is a form of academic writing which follows formal structure, clarity, and evidence based argumentation. Now let's discuss about the differences between the thesis and the academic write-up. So they are different. They are differentiated on the basis of purpose, depth, structure, and scope. And let's understand all those things. The purpose of the thesis, it is an in-depth research project written as a requirement for the completion of a degree, typically at the master's or doctoral level. Its main purpose is to contribute original research or a new perspective to the field of study. Whereas the academic write up, it's a broad term that includes any piece of academic writing, which may be essays, research papers, literature reviews, reports, and case studies. The purpose varies. Some may summarize existing knowledge, analyze specific issues, or discuss findings, but they are not always expected to contribute to original research. If we talk about the scope and depth, then thesis can be a comprehensive and much more extensive in both length and depth. It involves in-depth research, data collection, analysis, and often hundreds of pages, depends on the level of the study. On the other hand, academic write-up tends to be shorter, more focused, and vary in the length and depth based on the assignment or publication requirement. They are often completed within a shorter time frame than a thesis. Now, on the basis of a structure, a thesis follows a strict structure that usually includes a title page, abstract, introduction, literature review, methodology, results discussion, conclusion, references, and sometimes the appendices. So, this structured format helps to systematically present research findings. Whereas the academic write-up, it can be flexible and depends on the type of the document. For example, essay may have an introduction, body, or conclusion, while the research paper includes a section like an introduction, literature review, analysis, and conclusion, but may not include as many detailed sections as a thesis. On the basis of original research requirement, the conduction of the original research is the central requirement for a thesis. It involves research questions or hypotheses, that is the gathering of the data, and it provides
जी मैं बोलो ये क्या हुआ पता नहीं वो समझ नहीं आया हाँ, हाँ, हाँ। किसी ने हमें एक बटन भी दबा दिया शायद एंड वाला नहीं नहीं हमने और लोगों को दे दिया ना वो ऐसे दबने नहीं दी आए मानो तो लोगों को वसना मैडम को बोलते हैं कि दोबारा
Am I audible, ma'am? Yes, ma'am, you're audible. Due to some technical glitch, it just happened. Yes, sorry for the inconvenience caused. Yes. Just give me 1 second to regain the screen. short afterwards. Till then, others also will join back. How do you want to play this? Let's go. So, shall we start?
Yes, ma'am, yes.
Okay. So, we were discussing about the differences between the thesis and an academic write-up. So, we have gone through the various bases on which they have been differentiated. Now, let's start with the original research requirement. And on this basis, the thesis is a central requirement. The original research is the central requirement for a thesis, and it involves formulating a research question or hypothesis, gathering data, and analyzing it to provide new insights or new findings. Whereas academic writer, they require original research. Some may rely on the synthesizing existing information or providing theoretical analysis without conducting new experiments or the studies. If we talk about the time commitment, then this is often takes months to years to complete, as it is a major requirement for the graduation or involves extensive research. Rest without plans. A thesis is highly detailed, structured, and original academic document specifically for degree completion, whereas academic write-up is an umbrella term for various types of scholarly writing with diverse purposes, length, and structure. Now, let's understand about the types of thesis. There are basically, we can categorize into three types of thesis. The first one is the research-based thesis. So this type of thesis is a typical in the field like science and social science, which includes the original research such as experiments, data analysis, and theoretical modeling to add new knowledge to the field. Another one is project-based thesis.
Hello, hello,
Hello,
Polly.
please mute yourself. Okay. The another type of thesis is project-based thesis, which is often applied in the applied fields of engineering and business, which involves creating a practical project or solution, or designing a software, creating a business model, or developing a product. Next is literature-based thesis, which this type of reviews and synthesizing existing research to find the patterns, gaps, and new insights. And it is common in the humanities and social science, where you might not collect the new data but interpret or critique current research. So, thesis is a weaving of theory and facts that makes the fabric of knowledge. Marvin Harris once said that facts are always unreliable without theory, and theories without facts are meaningless. So, a logical structure which reflects and clarifies the relationship between the theory and fact of the research paper is the thesis. So, now let's begin how to structure your thesis. So, first of all, let's understand about the key elements of the thesis. It will include the title page, where you will write the title, your name, supervisor's name, and the date. Then, next part will be of the abstract, which will summarize the thesis within 250 to 300 words. Then, acknowledgement, which is need to gratitude those helped. Afterwards, there will be the introduction, which sets the context, introduces the research questions. Then, literature review, which will be the overview of the existing research related to your topic. Afterwards, the methodology will be there, which will explain the research methods. Then, presenting of data or findings in the results and discussion, where you will also interpret your findings. Then, you will conclude the summary and all the possible future direction in the conclusion section. Afterwards, there will be the references, that means all the list of sources which were cited in your thesis. Appendix, which will be the additional material. If required, you will add it. Now, let's begin with the title. The title, which should have adequately described the contents of the paper in the fewest possible words. It should not be too long or too short generally, and it should consist of only 10 to 12 words. It should not include any unnecessary words nor waste space with phrases such as observations on or a study of. It should not contain any abbreviations also. Afterwards, the abstract, it should be included at the beginning of the thesis. Abstracts are generally written in the past tense, and it should not include the references to the literature or the figures and tables in the body of thesis. It should not include the information that is not in the paper, should not contain the abbreviations or acronyms unless standard or very well known. The abstract should state the purpose of the study or investigation, basic procedures, the selection of study subjects or laboratory animals, observational and analytical methods. The main findings, which is giving specific data and their statistical significance, if possible, and the principle and the conclusion. So it should emphasize the new and important aspects of the study or observation. And it should mention that why, what, where, and how of your research work has been completed. So it must include some important findings. And finally, it should have the conclusion in the last line. Next is the acknowledgement, which are, the gratitudes are always appreciated. So the contributions that need acknowledging but do not justify authorship, such as general support by the department chair, acknowledgement of the technical help, acknowledgements of the financial or material support, which should specify the nature of the support and the relationships that may pose a conflict of interest. Technical help is better acknowledged in a paragraph separate from that acknowledging other contributions. You should use simple sentence while writing your acknowledgement, and it should also include thanks to the supervisor, the typist, and the people who helped in your work. Now, the contents and abbreviations in the research thesis. There must be the table of content, which will provide a structured overview of your thesis and will going to help the readers to navigate through the different sections of your thesis. So it must be clear, well organized, and formatted consistently. The key points for formatting the table of content is to you must use separate headings for each and every text sections, just like the introduction, literature review, methodology, etc. Figures and tables if they are there. So you must list them separately. Use hierarchical structure, the main section in the bold or uppercase, then you should mention the subsection with indented for clarity. And of course, the page number for each section should be mentioned. Here you can see a format of the table of content. First, the abstract acknowledgement, list of abbreviations, list of tables and figures, they are all mentioned in the Roman letters. That is the page number in the Roman letters. And the main content, that is the introduction, should start with the bold numeric figure, that is the 1. Now, if some subsections of introductions are there, then that should be initiated with, for example, 1.1, that is the background of the study, then 1.2, another section of the introduction, that is the research problem, and should be ended with the page number there. Then the chapter 2, just like the literature review, 3, methodology, chapter 4, result and discussion, and last, it can and with the appendixes and references. So it should look like a clear picture. It should give you the way. Next, if the list of figures are there, then they should be separated from the table of content, and you should giving its number also, just like if it is in chapter 1 and figure is the first, then you should write 1.1, and you should mention the name of the figure. For example, here the name of the figure is growth of renewable energy, and it is on page number 4. Then if it is in chapter 2 and if it is third picture, so experimental setup for battery testing is the name of the figure, and it is on page number 15. Then there is the list of tables. Summary of battery technology is the name of the table, and it is on page number 8. So in this way, you can summarize the list of tables and the list of figures. Next is the abbreviation section. The abbreviation list, it will help the readers to understand the technical terms and acronyms used in the thesis. You should uh, follow certain rules for the abbreviations, that they should arrange alphabetically and should use a consistent format. You may use full term first, followed by the abbreviation, or you can use the abbreviation first, followed by the full term. As you can see here, that if certain kind of abbreviations are used in the thesis, throughout the thesis, you can write the abbreviation only, because you have given the full form here in the abbreviation list. For example, AI, you can use throughout the AI only, because abbreviation, the artificial intelligence has been given here in the list of abbreviation. Another example you can see, that is of the CO2, carbon dioxide. So you can use like this. And this summary and introduction for your thesis. The introduction is considered as the backbone of the thesis, and it is the most critical section of the research, and it sets the stage for the study. It explains why the research was undertaken and presents the central research question. A well-written introduction engages the reader, provides essential background, and clarifies the study's objective without unnecessary detail. Let's begin. What's the purpose of the introduction? It serves to justify the research. You must explain why the study is important. To state the research question, it clearly articulate the problem being investigated. So you should write your problem in a very clear way here in the introduction. It will provide the background. It offers relevant scientific context without overwhelming details. You should define the scope here, which will clarify what aspects the research will cover. You should present the aim here to state the research objectives and hypotheses if they are applicable. Now, structuring of the introduction. Opening statement, engaging the reader. As we can see that introduction is the first part of the thesis, so we are saying that it is the opening statement. So the first few sentences should be compelling enough to attract the reader's attention. We should avoid overgeneralized or exaggerated claims. Instead, use an intriguing fact, a thought-provoking question, or a relevant statistical to set the tone. And you might have heard also that the first impression is the last impression. So if some reader is reading for the first time, so it should give a impression. And here you can see an example also. It is saying that despite significant advances in the renewable energy, global reliance on the fossil fuels continues to pose environmental threats. In 2023, fossil fuels consumption accounted for over 80% of the global energy use, leading to record breaking carbon emissions. And this pressing issue raises a critical question: how can innovative energy storage solution enhance the efficiency of renewable sources? So by going through this, few sentences, we can understand that the fossil fuels consumption is, has been over about 80%. So here is a, aim is also there that we are going to study the fossil fuel consumptions. Then we are having a problem also here, and we have raised a question also here. So it is a good example of having all types of things which may be included in the introduction part. Now, what is the scientific basis of the study? So, first of all, introduce key concepts which are related to your research. Provide a brief background of the subject, referencing only the essential scientific developments. Mention the previous research that led to your study and identifying the existing gaps. Keep this section focused and do not include textbook definitions or unnecessary historical details. You should highlight the gap or unresolved issues in the current knowledge also. Avoid making exaggerated claims. Focus on only the real research needed. You should clearly state the aim of your research. If applicable, mention the hypothesis of your study test also. And you should avoid the technical details, save those for the methodology section. All the technical details, they should go for the methodology section. Another example is also given here. Next, significance of the study. You should explain why the study matters and who will be benefited from your findings. That may be the society, that may be the scientific community, industries, or policymakers. So, who are going to be benefited? It should be clearly mentioned in the introduction part. What kind of common mistakes we should avoid while writing the introduction? Let's discuss. Too much of general background, it should be avoided. That means that detailed explanation you should avoid while writing the introduction. You should cite only the key studies that are directly relevant. Say, if you are, mentioning the results or the conclusion, you should not mention those just because there is another chapter that is the result, discussion, and conclusion. So you should save this for these sections. The lack of clarity, it ensures the research question and objectives are explicitly stated. Now, the next chapter of the thesis is the literature review. And literature review is considered as the foundation of the thesis. And it serves multiple functions in the academic writing, which includes demonstrating an understanding of the existing research in the field, identifying the key debates, theories, and methodologies. It is highlighting the gaps, inconsistencies, and unresolved issues also. And it's provide a foundation for your research and justifying its relevance. And developing a conceptual framework for your research study. Steps to conduct a literature review. First of all, you are going to identify the relevant sources, and that may be the scholarly articles, books, conference papers, and credible reports related to your research work. You can go for certain kind of academic databases just like Google Scholar, PubMed, JSTOR, Science Direct, Scopus elsewhere, right? Where you can go for a good cited research papers. So you should set criteria for the inclusion and exclusion, and you should take notes on the key findings, theories, and research methods which is used in each source. How to organize the literature thematically? Instead of reviewing sources one by one, you should group them on the basis of the themes, theories, or the research approaches. Common thematic structures, they may be the chronological, thematic, methodological, and theoretical. Chronological means tracing the evolution of ideas over the time. Thematic, you should organize the research around the key topics or the issues. Then, under the methodological type, you should compare the different research approaches and the methods. And theoretical, you should discuss the various theoretical perspectives in that research field. Then highlight the trends, conflicts, and the gaps. Identifying the patterns or dominant perspectives in the field. You should identify them. If conflicts are there, the contradictory findings or differ interpretation, you must mention in your literature review. If gaps are there, then you must point out those areas that requires further research, outdated studies, and overlooked topics. You should develop a framework for your research. That means you should the literature review to position your study within the broader research landscape. You should show how your work builds on or challenges existing research. So you should establish a theoretical or conceptual model that guides your research questions and methodology. Now, what to avoid while writing your literature review? First of all, you should summarizing without analysis. A good literature review goes behind summarizing sources. It critically engages with them. Lack of synthesis, simply listing studies one by one does not show a deep understanding. You should connect the ideas and whatever you have find, they must be connected across the various sources. Ignoring contradiction, acknowledge and discuss the conflict research instead of focusing only on the supportive study, right? If you are getting different results and you are having the different findings which you were hypothesizing, you should include them also. Then you should avoid the failing to justify your study. You should ensure the literature review clearly shows why your research is relevant. A well conducted literature review strengthens the foundation of your research and it ensures it contributes meaningfully to academic discussions. Now, let's start the methodology, how to write the methodology or how to include the methodology section in your thesis. Methodology is considered as the blueprint of the thesis. And research methodology, it refers to the systematic plan and approach used to conduct a study. It outlines the research designs, data collection, sampling techniques, and data analysis methods. A well structured methodology, it ensures the research is valid, reliable, and replicable. Now let's begin with components of the research methodology. The first one is the research design. It is an overall strategy for conducting the study. It determines how the data will be collected, analyzed, and interpreted. And there are three main types. The first one is the qualitative research. It focuses on exploring the experiences, meanings, and patterns. The methods include interviews, focus groups, and case studies. It is suitable for understanding the human behavior, social interpretation, and perception. Quantitative research, it will involve the numerical data and the statistical analysis, which is based on the surveys, experiments, and secondary data analysis. Then is the mixed methods where the qualitative and quantitative both kind of approaches are combined and it will provide a comprehensive understanding of the research problem in the interdisciplinary studies. Now, the data collection methods, how you are going to collect the data, which based on the research design and objectives. The first is the primary data collection, which is based on the surveys, the questionnaires, the interviews, the experiments you have conducted in the labs, and the observations you have found. So this will be the primary or the original data. The secondary data, it involves the published studies to support the research arguments. Archival research, which is analyzing the historical, you are going to use the historical records, reports, and old databases. So you are interpreting on the primary data which has been published so early. Now the sampling techniques. The sampling, it involves the selecting the participants or the data sources for the study. And the choice of sampling methods, it impacts the validity of the result. So probability sampling, that is the random selection in which the every individual has an equal chance of the selection. The population can be divided into the subgroups and and the samples can be taken from each. And also you can select every nth participant from the list. And this all includes the random selection. In case of non-probability sampling, here the selecting participants is based on the availability, where the participants are available or not. So you can choose a participant which are based on the specific characteristics also, and even you can recruit some others for this purpose. So this will be included in the non-probability sampling. Now, next is the data analysis methods, how you are going to analyze the data. So researchers, they must analyze the data to answer the research questions. And it may be classified into two types, that is the qualitative and quantitative data analysis. Qualitative includes the thematic analysis, content, and narrative analysis, which depends on identifying the patterns and the themes in the qualitative data. There will be a systematic coding and categorization of that text data, and then examining on the personal stories or the experienced base. That means the narrative analysis. Under the quantitative data analysis, you can find the statistical or descriptive kind of, just like the mean, median, mode, or you can calculate the standard deviation. You can regression analysis can also be done. Correlation test and hypothesis testing can also be done under the inferential statistics. And here, for your support, there are certain kind of software also there, that may be the SPSS, R or Excel. You can use these databases. Now, wind up with certain tips for the effective research methodology. First of all, you should ensure that the chosen methods align with your research objectives. Then you should justify why the specific methods were chosen over the others. You should clearly explain the data collection and analysis procedure. You should address potential limitations and ethical consideration. And of course, you should have the reliable and valid measurement tools also. Next is the result and finding, which is the lifeline of your thesis. The importance of presenting the results, in a very effective manner, and it is very crucial for communicating the data insights. The way results are displayed, it can influence how they are understood by the audience or the reader. You should using the charts, graphs, tables, and you should summarize the helps make complex data into the easier one to interpret. So now let's discuss about the methods of presenting the results. The textual presentation used when explaining key trends, comparisons, or unusual findings. It should be concise and avoid repeating data already shown in the tables or graphs. Here, there is an example that survey results indicate 75% of the respondents which prefer online shopping, while other 25% prefer in the store purposes. So this is a textual presentation which is clearly mentioning the exact figure of the respondents. So you have mentioned it in the text form. Another method for presenting results is the tabular presentations. You can have the numerical data in a very well organized format in form of the table. So you should label the rows and columns in the table. You should include the units of the measurement. You should highlight the key figures also in the bold and shading. Then there may be a graphical representations in form of charts and graphs, and here you can use the bar charts, line graphs, pie charts, and scatter plots, which can be vary according to your observations. Now, certain key points for the effective presentations. You must be clear and concise. You should avoid unnecessary complexity. Keep your data in the presentation simple. Use headings and captions to explain the tables and graphs. You should highlight the key findings and emphasize the most important trends or the pattern. For example, in particular year, the production is the maximum. So you should highlight that particular year. You should avoid the excessive details also. So do not overwhelm the audience or the reader with too much of data, which is focusing on the meaningful results. You should summarize findings rather than listing every single data point. So you should summarize those data. Use consistent formatting. Keep your font size clear, colors and labels throughout. You should use the uniform format throughout all your visuals. And the final tip for it is that your results should tell a clear story. They should not just be the numbers and charts, but should be interpreted and linked to your research questions. Next is discussion. The discussion section where you will interpret your results, compare them to previous research, discuss their significance, and acknowledge limitations. And this section connects your findings to the broader research context and highlights their implications. Key elements of the discussions, they are: interpret results in relation to the research questions. You should explain how your findings answer your research question or support your hypothesis. You should compare your results with your existing literature. Do they confirm, do they contradict, or expand some previous studies? Discuss the limitations. Every research study has certain kind of limitations. So acknowledge them, demonstrates academic honesty, and helps future researchers to refine their study. So whatever the results you are getting, maybe the contradict, maybe in according to your hypothesis, you must mention or you must discuss all those in this section. So common limitations, they may be the small sample size, the potential bias in the responses, constraint in the data collection methods, short, steady duration. So all these are the limitations, but you should mention all those clearly here. You should explain the implications of the findings. What do the results mean for the theory, practice, or the policy? And how can they be applied in real world context? Next will be the conclusion part of the thesis, which will provide a concise summary of your findings, discusses significance, and suggest areas of the future research. It will summarize the key findings without repeating the details from the result and discussion section. You can see here an example that this study found that increased social media usage is linked to lower self-esteem among the teenagers, particularly due to the social comparison. However, adults were less affected. So, in this few sentences, we are concluding that how the social media have affected the teenagers, but adults were less affected. So, this is a kind of confusion. So, here we are not repeating what kind of data and what kind of discussion has been done, because we have mentioned all those things in the previous chapters. Now, the next portion of the conclusion will be suggestions for the future research. So, you should identify the gap and you should propose the new research directions. The conclusion must reflect on the significance of your work. Why does your study matter? How does it contribute to the existing body of the knowledge? And the final tips for concluding is: keep your discussion analytical, not just descriptive. Be honest about the limitations without undermining your study. And with a strong closing statement that reinforces the importance of your research. Now, you should include the future aspects in the thesis, which is a section and it is very critical part of the thesis as it demonstrates the broader relevance of your research and identifies the areas that need further exploration. Below is a detailed guide on why and how to include in your research thesis. Now, importance of future work in your thesis, you should include the future aspect because of the multiple purposes. It will identify the research gap, it will encourage the further studies, it will acknowledge the limitations, and it will enhance the research impact also. You can mention the future aspects in the conclusion section, or if the future aspects is in the more detailed form, then you can use it in the separate portion also. And you can also use this future aspects in the discussion chapter also. So all there must be an interconnection between them. The future aspects includes you know, identifying the unanswered questions. What were the limitations of your studies? Were there any unexpected findings that need to be more investigated? Suggest methodological improvements. It could be a different research method yield better results than purpose of the expanding the scope. Could similar research be conducted in the different settings, different population, industries, or in different environments? Is there any potential for interdisciplinary collaboration? And how can be the findings be applied in the industries or in the real world? So all these type of questions, they can be interpreted in the future aspect section. These are the examples for the future aspects. Let's discuss that what kind of mistakes should be avoided in while writing the future aspects. Being too vague, avoid generic statements like more research is needed. What kind of more research? You must be specific that on this particular topic, the investigation is more needed. You should making unrealistic claims. You should avoid those. Future work should be feasible and logical. Repeating limitation instead of just listing what your study like, suggest ways to overcome those limitations. And final thought: a well-written future work section strengthens your thesis by showing how your research contributes to ongoing academic discussions. Now, the next part of the thesis is the references. That means you need to listing all the sources cited in your thesis, as it provides the full details of all the sources cited throughout your research. A well-structured reference list, it will enhance the credibility of your work. It will allow readers to verify the information and ensures you to give the proper credit to the original authors. It is very important to have a proper reference list. It should help, actually, it helps to avoid the plagiarism, sorry, by acknowledging the original authors. It supports your arguments with credible sources. It allows readers to locate and verify the information used, and it will demonstrate throughout the research and academic integrity. The general guidelines for the references: you should follow a consistent citation style, and different referencing styles, they are very common, just like the APA, MLA, Chicago, Harvard referencing, and IEEE. So each citation style, they have the specific rules of formatting, which includes author names, publication year, title, source details, and you should always check your institutional preferred style guide, right, before writing the references. They must be ordered and well structured. You should arrange them in the alphabetically order by the last name of the first author, as in case of IEEE. You should use hanging indentation where the first line is flush left. Example of certain alphabetical orders in the APA style, that first of all, the last name is written, that is the Brown, then initials J, then the year of the publishing of the research, then the journal name, and from where it was published, that is the Oxford University Press. And I think the next session of this FDP is based on the references and citation only. So I think we should not go in detailed discussion for the references. So you should include the websites, the books formats, right? The conference papers also in your thesis and dissertation. If some thesis and dissertations you should mention all those. So you should definitely use all those references in your thesis, and you should cite them, you should quote them inside that text. And instead of manually formatting the references, you can use the citation management tools. That may be the Jotaro, EndNote, Mendeley, Google Scholar, right? So you can go for these tools. Common mistakes to avoid in the references. You should missing or inaccurate information. references. You should ensure every text citation has a corresponding entry in the reference list. Incorrect formatting, follow the required citation style consistently. Outdated sources, use recent, relevant, and credible references. Not so old references should be included in your thesis. Improper alphabetization, you should avoid that. Broken URL, please check the URL if they are accessible or accurate. Only then you should incorporate that in the references. Next part is the appendix. Appendix for the research, it is the additional material. And they are the supplementary sections in the research thesis if they are required to support your main text. And these materials, they are not essential for understanding the main arguments, your methodology, your findings, your conclusion, but they provide the further depth, evidences, and clarification. Below are the key elements that may be included in the appendix, the raw data and the calculation. If tables are so large and the data is too much, too extensive, so you should not mention that. The main can be taken in the methodology section, but others heavy data can be taken in this section. If calculations are there, then you can take into the appendix section. A statistical analysis output can be included in this section. If you have done the survey, the questionnaires, the results with complete responses can be included in the appendix section. If certain supplementary figures and tables are there in support of your findings, you can add here. The photographs, maps, or images that provide the further context, you can include here in the supplementary section. The questionnaires, the interview transcripts, and the surveys, all these can be included in this section. Any kind of additional experimental procedures or protocols, uh, the computer code, algorithm, the data analysis, the detailed descriptions, all this can be included in the appendixes. Then we can have an example here. For example, if you are related with the chemistry research work, so if you are synthesizing certain kind of compounds and you want their studies like IR, NMR, XRD studies, so you can have those data directly in the appendix. You can summarize that in the methodology and result discussion section, but the extra material, whatever has been provided by the labs, you can include here in the appendix section. So each appendix, it should have the title. It should be listed in the table of content also. And if multiple appendixes are there, just label them. That is the appendix A, appendix B, and certain others. And it should be referred to appendix in the main text also. Like that detail has been mentioned in the appendix A or detail has been mentioned in the appendix A, right? You can mention that in the main text also. Now, let's go for certain thesis writing tips. Writing thesis is a significant academic challenge. It requires careful planning, organization, and revision also. So here are the key strategies to ensure a smooth and successful thesis writing process. You should start early. The reason is, writing a thesis is a time consuming process and it involves the research writing, revisions, and the feedback. Procrastination can lead to rushed work, lower quality, and unnecessary stress. And how you can start early? You should set a timeline. You should break down the thesis into the stages. Should have a deadline for each. And you should start gathering the sources and taking notes before you begin writing. Regularly. Even